Ludwig Humboldt stood just beyond the threshold of the beast's gaping maw, the dim light catching on teeth that gleamed like polished ivory. Each one was perfectly formed, tapering to a lethal point, as if nature itself had sculpted them for nothing but tearing and rending. The arcs of enamel fit together in a flawless predatory symmetry, creating a jawline as beautiful as it was murderous. They were perfect, perfectly sharp, perfectly deadly, and intimidating enough that any sane man would have backed away. But Ludwig's lips curled into something dangerously close to admiration. Exquisite, he murmured, stepping closer, his eyes scanning the curves and edges like a jeweler appraising diamonds. You could cleave bone like parchment with these magnificent specimens. The monster's hot breath spilled over him, thick with the scent of blood and rot, but Ludwig didn't flinch. His gaze wandered deeper, past those immaculate blades, toward the darkness at the back of the throat, where the unknown awaited. The beast growled, the sound vibrating in his ribs, a warning to run. Instead, Ludwig smirked faintly and adjusted his spectacles. Marvelous craftsmanship, he said softly, as though complimenting the monster itself, though I imagine you prefer to demonstrate rather than simply display. The monster's eyes narrowed. It had heard this tone before from prey that didn't yet understand it was prey. The moment Ludwig's boots touched the slick, fleshy ground inside the monster's throat, he straightened up as though stepping into a lecture hall. The heat and humidity wrapped around him, the air thick with the metallic tang of the creature's breath. Far above, the light from the outside world shrank to a narrow slit between rows of teeth before vanishing entirely as the monster's jaws clamped shut. He walked forward slowly, boots squelching in the mucus-laced surface beneath him, his gloved fingers trailing across the glistening walls of muscle that flexed in slow, deliberate pulses. The monster's deep growl reverberated through the chamber, a low thunder in its living architecture. Magnificent, Ludwig murmured, voice steady, eyes darting like a predator's, not in fear, but in calculation. Such perfect symmetry in the dentition, and a swallowing mechanism that could shame an anaconda. The throat muscles tightened, pressing him deeper, guiding him toward the cavernous stomach below. Instead of resisting, Ludwig leaned into the motion as if the monster were escorting him to some long-awaited meeting. "Oh, you think you've won," he said softly, a smirk curving his lips. "But this is my experiment now." The monster shuddered as if in amusement, dragging him further into the dark, and Ludwig felt its heartbeat echoing through the walls, slow, steady, and utterly unaware of the surprises he carried within his coat. The muscular tunnel eased its grip as Ludwig was deposited into the vast chamber below. He landed in a crouch on the strange membrane floor, the surface yielding slightly beneath his boots like a taut drum. A humid wave of air washed over him, warm, wet, and metallic, carrying the faint scent of iron and something older, primal. He straightened, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose, eyes sweeping the place like a man examining the blueprints of a cathedral. The chamber was immense. Its walls glistened with thick mucus, each rise and fall in the fleshy surface synchronized with the creature's breathing. Luminous veins ran across the ceiling, casting a soft, pulsating red glow that painted everything in a visceral light. Ludwig's gloved hand brushed the membrane at his feet. "Not acid. Not yet," he observed, noting how the surface twitched faintly at his touch. "Adaptive digestion. The chamber is waiting to decide how to break me down." A low rumble coursed through the walls, the sound more like a chuckle than a growl. The creature was aware of his presence, and it was enjoying this. "Ah," Ludwig said, smiling faintly, "so you are watching me." He reached into the folds of his coat, retrieving a sleek metal device that unfolded like a surgeon's toolkit, only far stranger. Needles, sensors, and vials glinted faintly in the glow. "I wonder," he mused aloud, "if I can take your vitals from in here." The stomach walls contracted in response, a slow, squeezing motion as if to remind him of the danger. Instead of fear, Ludwig's smirk deepened. "Go ahead," he said, his voice low but clear. "Show me what you're capable of." The chamber shifted. The floor beneath Ludwig's boots pulsed harder now, the fleshy membrane warming as if the creature had decided to turn up the temperature in preparation for digestion. From the far wall, faint hissing sounds began to build, acidic vapors rising in thin, curling wisps. Ludwig inhaled through his nose, tang in the air, and smiled like a man reading an opponent's opening move. Oh, so we're escalating already. He stepped forward, one gloved hand brushing the wall. The muscles tensed beneath his touch, squeezing slightly, testing him. A faint tremor rippled through the chamber, and Ludwig could almost feel the monster's heartbeat quicken. "You're efficient, I'll grant you that," he said, his voice low but resonant in the enclosed space. "But I think you've made a grave miscalculation." The rumble that answered was almost smug. Ludwig straightened, adjusting his spectacles with deliberate calm. "You've swallowed the wrong doctor." His eyes narrowed, and there was a dangerous edge to his tone now. "I am not the one to mess with." He drew something from his coat pocket, a compact, polished device bristling with small prongs and blinking lights. With a sharp flick of his wrist, it extended, humming faintly as its sensors lit up in the dim red glow of the chamber. "I'm here to learn," Ludwig continued, stepping closer to the wall, "and you are going to help me, whether you like it or not." The monster's stomach walls tightened abruptly, a ripple of muscle trying to push him toward the floor, but Ludwig planted his feet and leaned in, pressing the device against the living surface. A high-pitched tone rang out, followed by a pulse that made the entire chamber shudder. The veins above flickered in response, the heartbeat pounding louder for a brief instant. "Ah!" Ludwig murmured with satisfaction. "Now we're talking." The chamber quivered under Ludwig's touch. The monster's once steady rhythm faltered for a beat, a faint hitch in its breathing betraying its discomfort. "Oh, you felt that, didn't you?" Ludwig said, his voice curling into a quiet taunt. He kept the device pressed firmly to the stomach wall, its hum deepening into a low, resonant thrum that seemed to echo through the creature's entire body. A wave of muscle tried to force him backward, contracting with sudden force, but Ludwig moved with it, like a dancer matching his partner's step. "You're strong," he admitted, "but brute strength is predictable. Predictable means exploitable." The acid vapors thickened, spilling from small folds in the chamber walls, their hiss like a warning. The heat rose sharply, sweat beginning to bead along Ludwig's hairline. He calmly reached into his coat, produced a small vial of shimmering liquid, and poured it into the membrane at his feet. The reaction was immediate. The section of floor beneath him went temporarily numb, the twitching ceasing as if stunned. Ludwig crouched, tapping it lightly with a gloved finger. "Local inhibition," he said into his recorder. "Reaction time, 1.8 seconds. Recovery rate to be determined." From somewhere deep within the monster, a low growl rumbled, not the confident predatory sound from before, but one tinged with confusion. Ludwig's smirk sharpened. He rose to his full height, hands clasped loosely behind his back as though delivering a lecture to an unseen audience. "You see, my friend, there's an unspoken rule in nature. Never swallow something you don't understand, because sometimes that something will start poking back." The walls pulsed again, slower this time, the motion less an attack and more a readjustment. Ludwig felt it. The monster was reassessing him. "Good," Ludwig said quietly. "Now we can begin our real conversation." Ludwig set the recorder on a steady loop, its tiny microphone picking up every squelch, pulse, and vibration around him. The fleshy chamber amplified the sounds until they felt like they were crawling along his bones. From his coat, he pulled a palm-sized tablet linked to the humming device he'd embedded in the stomach wall earlier. A faint 3D schematic began to form on its screen, a slowly building map of the monster's internal layout. "Perimeter mapping, 73% complete," Ludwig murmured. He rotated the holographic outline with his fingertips, tracing the twisting passageways beyond this chamber. Secondary chambers here, perhaps specialized for different prey. Fascinating. The stomach flexed suddenly, a ripple surging through the membrane as though trying to erase the device's connection. Ludwig braced himself, but his grin didn't falter. "No, no, don't be shy. Let me see all of you." A deep, irritated rumble rolled through the walls, followed by a sudden rush of acid vapor, thicker and hotter than before. The red mist swirled around him, licking at the edges of his coat. Ludwig didn't flinch. "Your chemistry is impressive," he said, reaching for a slim syringe from his kit. He drew in a sample of the vapor, capped it, and slid it into a reinforced pocket. "But this coat's lining? Acid resistant. If you're hoping for a quick dissolution, you'll be disappointed." The monster's heartbeat surged, loud and heavy, thudding through the floor. Ludwig pressed one ear to the membrane, eyes half lidded in concentration. "You're trying to intimidate me with volume," he said softly, "but I hear it, the irregularities, the slight stutter on every fourth beat. You're not invincible." The chamber walls shivered, whether in anger or unease, Ludwig couldn't tell, yet. Straightening, he placed his palm against the living surface, speaking clearly so the vibrations would carry through the monster's entire body. "You've swallowed the wrong doctor," Ludwig said, his voice like cold steel. "And before I'm finished in here, you'll understand exactly what that means." The stomach walls contracted again, this time not in an attempt to crush him, but in a slow, probing squeeze, like the monster was trying to gauge his intentions. Ludwig only smiled at the change. "Curious now, are we?" he murmured, brushing his fingers along the warm, slick membrane. "Good. Curiosity is the first step toward compliance." He knelt and retrieved his embedded device, flicking a small dial on its side. The hum deepened into a low-frequency vibration, so faint it was almost inaudible, but Ludwig could feel the entire chamber subtly shift in response. The heartbeat above him quickened, and a ripple of muscle ran along the floor beneath his boots. "There," Ludwig said with satisfaction. "Your body listens, whether you want it to or not." The creature rumbled in protest, a bass-like sound that seemed to roll straight through his ribcage. Ludwig ignored it, his attention fixed on the tablet in his hand as the holographic map expanded further. Now he could see the connecting pathways, the winding tunnels of intestine, the auxiliary chambers for storage and digestion, even the muscular valves that could be manipulated to alter the monster's movements. With a few careful adjustments to the dial, Ludwig sent a pulse through the stomach wall. The reaction was immediate, an involuntary shift of the monster's internal muscles that caused its entire body to tilt slightly. "Ah," Ludwig chuckled. "So you can be steered." The heartbeat thudded harder now, like a drum being struck in warning. Ludwig stepped toward the center of the chamber, his shadow stretching under the red glow of the veins above. "You wanted me as prey," he said, his voice carrying through the living walls, "but I think we both know who's holding the reins now." The chamber pulsed again, not with the hunger of a predator, but with the restless energy of something that had just realized it might have underestimated what it had consumed. The stomach's rhythmic motions grew erratic, no longer the slow, methodical churn of a confident predator. Now the movements felt unsettled. Ludwig stood in the center of the chamber, the low hum of his device still resonating through the monster's body. Each pulse sent involuntary tremors through the walls, the muscle fibers twitching like an eye forced to blink. "Ah," Ludwig said with quiet amusement, tilting his head. "You've realized I'm not just another meal, haven't you?" A deep groan rolled through the chamber, almost like a sigh, followed by a sudden shift under his feet. The membrane floor tightened, and a ripple of muscle pushed toward the upper passage, the beginnings of a regurgitation reflex. Ludwig smiled knowingly. "Trying to get rid of me already? How rude. We were just beginning to understand each other." The monster's body lurched again, harder this time, the walls squeezing in coordinated waves, all pulling him upward. Acid vapors hissed around him, not in an attempt to dissolve, but as if the creature was trying to flush him out. "Interesting," Ludwig mused aloud, gripping one of the embedded vein-like ridges to steady himself. "You're not expelling me out of power. You're doing it out of desperation. You want me gone." Another convulsion rolled through the chamber, stronger now, the heartbeat hammering like war drums. The holographic map in his hand flickered with the monster's elevated stress response. "Ah, I see." Ludwig's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "You've realized something. You can't win this fight while I'm in here." The stomach walls pulsed again, urgently, the muscular contractions becoming more frantic. Above, the throat opened slightly, drawing in a rush of cooler air. Ludwig adjusted his glasses and chuckled. "Go on, then. Try to spit me out. But remember, if I leave, I'll take more than just my notes with me." The monster shuddered violently, torn between survival instinct and its own pride. The stomach walls heaved again, this time with a force that nearly knocked Ludwig off his feet. The membrane under his boots surged upward in rolling waves, trying to fling him toward the yawning passage above. The hiss of air rushing down from the open throat was louder now, cold, compared to the humid heat of the chamber. Ludwig braced himself against a vein-like ridge, his grip steady, his smirk unshaken. "So eager to be rid of me," he said, his tone almost conversational, yet unwilling to admit it out loud. Typical predator pride. The monster's body jolted again, a violent convulsion that tightened every muscle in the chamber. The pulse of its heartbeat thundered in his ears, faster than before, erratic. Ludwig checked his device. It was still embedded in the wall, still humming, still mapping every desperate move the creature made. "You should know," Ludwig continued, his voice carrying easily through the vibrating chamber, "I don't leave on anyone else's terms. Least of all a host who thought I'd make a fine meal." The monster groaned, a sound that reverberated through the floor, followed by another sharp upward pull. Ludwig allowed himself to be lifted halfway toward the throat before yanking his device free of the stomach wall. The instant he did, the pulse of control he'd been sending into the creature's body stopped, leaving the monster momentarily disoriented. "Now," Ludwig said, tucking the device into his coat, "I'll grant you the mercy of my exit, but not because you forced me." The next heave launched him upward into the slick, muscular tunnel of the throat. Muscles squeezed around him, forcing him toward the jaws, and in less than a breath, the blinding light of the outside world split the darkness as the monster's mouth opened wide. Ludwig emerged in a surge of warm, damp air, landing with practiced precision on the ground before the beast. His coat was damp but intact, his glasses unbroken, and his smirk entirely unchanged. The monster loomed above him, its perfect teeth still glistening, but now there was no hunger in its eyes, only wariness. Ludwig straightened his coat and looked up at it. "Next time," he said, voice sharp as a scalpel, "choose your meals more wisely." The creature took a single reluctant step back, and Ludwig Humboldt walked away, already pulling out his recorder to dictate the first line of his newest study. Days later, Ludwig Humboldt sat at his desk, the soft yellow glow of a lamp pooling over stacks of handwritten notes, vials of strange fluids, and the compact device he had pried from the monster's stomach wall. Rain tapped gently against the tall windows of his study, a far gentler sound than the thundering heartbeat he'd left behind in the creature's depths. He spoke into his recorder, voice steady and crisp, open quote, "Subject colossal apex predator. Dentition. Flawless. Swallowing reflex exceptional. Internal chamber behavior highly adaptive under stress. Most notable finding capable of fear." Close quote. He paused, allowing the last words to hang in the air before continuing. Open quote. "Specimen attempted to expel me after prolonged internal interference. Strong evidence of sentient level decision making under threat. Conclusion, will avoid me in future encounters." Close quote. Ludwig leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "Good. Let it remember me." Weeks passed. The next time he saw the monster, it was at a distance, half shrouded in the fog of the marshlands. Its massive head rose from the water, those perfect teeth catching the gray light. They locked eyes for a long, tense moment. And then the monster closed its mouth. No roar, no lunge, no challenge. Instead, it sank back into the water without a sound, the ripples spreading wide and slow. Ludwig chuckled under his breath. "Lesson learned?" he murmured. "Even the greatest predator knows when to leave well enough alone." He turned, coat flaring in the wind, already thinking of the next frontier, of what other creatures might be foolish enough to underestimate the wrong doctor.